Hello, this is Jay Michaels again, and here we are in the Fourth Folio. Now, we're coming close to the holiday season, and so we figured we'd pick one of Shakespeare's comedies, and we figured we'd do Twelfth Night, considering that was done as a celebration of the end of the 12 days of Christmas. So we're a little early, but I guess this comes as close as possible in terms of a Shakespeare holiday classic. I'm Jay Michaels, and the reason this is called the Fourth Folio, as I explained to our guest a few moments ago, many years ago, I found a book in an old library called The Apocryphal Works of Shakespeare. The book was from 1855, and I had never heard of this before, and suddenly my mind was opened to the notion of that there are plays that may not have been written by Shakespeare. There may have been a lot of plays not written by Shakespeare. All of them may not have been written by Shakespeare. And while that's a controversial thought, even now, 400 years later, it is something we discuss under our discussions of each play. With me is my colleague, Rodney Hakim. Rodney joined me when we did the Fourth Folio as a stage work, where we would read each Shakespeare play and basically ask the audience who wrote it. And Rodney, of all the guests back then, was the most brilliant. His concept of the Taming of the Shrew and so many others was truly fascinating. So when the time came to bring this to the cyber world, I was thrilled to work with Rodney once again. Rodney, please, how are you? What's new?
I'm doing well, Jay. It's always a pleasure to join you for yet another episode of our venture into the journey into finding out more about Shakespeare and his plays, and
whoever
to revisit whoever he is, and to revisit some of the work that we did with the Fourth Folio about a decade or so ago. But to do it now in the digital format and to present it to a wider audience on Facebook, on Twitter, and their other social media platforms. Jay and I have recently collaborated. I am the voice behind the New York Shakespeare social media feeds, and he and I had a very fun interview a couple of months back, which you can find in our archives on YouTube or on our Instagram page. And we chatted about what Jay's been up to. Jay, he's being modest. He doesn't give credit to himself for the fact that he's one of the more prolific Shakespeare producers in town, having produced on stage and on screen. I would say what, in the hundreds of Shakespeare's.
One third of his canon, and many of them 2, 3, 4, and for Hamlet 12 times.
So Jay's been around the block with Shakespeare quite a few times, and he and I have had some wonderful collaborations, as he mentioned in the beginning, with the stage version of Fourth Folio Series, and now with this online version of the presentation. And we're happy tonight to add a new participant. Tell us about who's our special guest tonight, Jay.
I'm really thrilled. Talk about Christmas presents. I put the call out. I was looking for someone who understood Twelfth Night. And I had hoped to get someone who maybe did a production or so, or studied it in school, something so we can chat with them. Little did I know I would get someone who did 3 productions of Twelfth Night, going back as far as the 80s. And just in case that wasn't enough, he's also writing a new musicalized version of it, setting it in the turbulent 60s. And I'm thrilled to hear more about that. And I'm thrilled to welcome Michael Medeiros to our program. Michael, welcome. Glad you could make it. How's everything with you?
Thank you for having me. I feel like I'm in really stellar company here. So I'm hoping I'll learn some things about the play. You know, I'm just from being here and listening to the two of you. It's really been just a thrill for me to be associated with the play so many times. It has its own problems and its own difficulties, and so I feel like, and I played Feste all 3 times in all 3 productions.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, so I had a chance to do it again and make it better a couple of times, and I think that was really important for my understanding both the character and the play as a whole. And I can truly say that after that, after 3 productions, I'm very much in love with the play in so many ways. I think it's a masterpiece, but it's also a mysterious masterpiece in some ways, I think you can say about it. Partly because this combination of sort of heartfelt pathos and wacky comedy is a pretty brilliant high wire act, no matter who wrote it. So that's been my experience so far. Anyway.
It sort of is Molière in some ways, in the sense that it gives you see the real difference in terms of the class situation.
Yeah.
At that point.
Definitely.
And you also see it in the intellect of the characters. It seems the lower on the ladder you are, the smarter you seem to be.
There's some
that hits right into Michael's personal experience with Twelfth Night. Michael, you played in all 3 occasions that you went back and forth with the play. You played Feste, who is the main clown, shall we say, in the show, or the fool. And the fools in Shakespeare, and Feste in particular, they're not so foolish. They provide an entertainment for the royalty, the duke, the queen, whoever the royal character is. But in many ways, they are a sounding board for that royal character, who provides them with wisdom and insights that they often lack. So tell us about your understanding of Feste and how that character made that impression on you.
I'm not sure I understand your question exactly, but I mean, how Feste impacted the play, or how he?
No. Tell us you with your personal runs with Feste. How did you feel about that character? Is it a comic character? Is it a tragic character? Is it a character who's wiser than the others? Is he a fool, as the name fool suggests?
No, I get it. Well, I came to think of the character as kind of the space in which the play existed, because he seemed to be able to speak to all sides of it and kept giving people perspective. But at the same time, I think and this division or this complexity in him, I think echoes the play itself, is that at the same time, there's an aspect of Feste that is very much Robin Williams. I mean, he thinks so fast on his feet, and his mind is so agile, and he comes out with these things seemingly out of nowhere, and he's able to speak to anyone. So I think I came to see him as kind of it was Twelfth Night was a play about a fool named Feste, but in my later dealings with a play as a writer, I really feel that it's Viola's play. For me, she's simply the best human being in the play, and I think we learn so much about her through such a small amount of information, and a lot of it's the feeling about her parents. That her and her brother both have. I think she had extremely good parenting. And then there was a clue in the play that always fascinated me, is that Sebastian, when he shows up in mid-act 1 and you realize that he's alive, he describes her as saying she had a mind that envy could not help but call it fair. He doesn't say anything about it. I mean, he does address her beauty a little bit in that same speech, but he praises her mind, which I thought was pretty radical and very interesting. And then at the same time, Viola, for me, is the center of the play's theme about love. There's so much in the play about love. It's a play about the pursuit of love. And Shakespeare constructs it so that we understand love through Viola's really sincere approach to it, but also through the completely idiotic approach of other characters. So we get that wonderful, entertaining contrast.
And isn't that a great way to understand the nature of the fool or the clown or the comic characters in Shakespeare? Is that you have the higher-minded comic characters like Feste, who is the fool, but he's also the one who dispenses wisdom, and he, in many ways, he's wiser than the monarch for whom he works. And then you have the low fools, the rustic clowns, you might want to call them. You have Sir Andrew, and you have Toby Belch, and the others, and all their chicanery. And then you have Malvolio, who's kind of like the diametric opposite of Feste. And they have their sparring between the two of them. Even in their names, Feste is Latin for happy, where Malvolio is ill will. So it's the one is a clown who is a good-natured clown, and the other one is a misanthrope, an evil-natured character. How's that dynamic between those two characters? Where do you find that?
That's really central to the play for me. Malvolio, yes, ill will. I always thought of him, even in the. I mean, I did three different productions set in three different periods. The first one was Elizabethan. The second one I locate sort of mid 18th century, and then the last one was set in the 50s. But in all three of them, I just felt intuitively that Malvolio was a kind of Nixonian Republican. That's what he distilled down to for me. And so and then in my own adaptation, I made Feste a black character. He's an old blues singer. Because let's face it, guys who sing the blues and who play jazz are the smartest people on the planet. They are professors. They, as I have Viola saying, they don't just know the notes, they see the whole map. They know how the road gets from one place to another. And so the conflict between the two of them, I think, is very, very intense, because Feste is about the essence of things and about the central truth of things, and Malvolio is about creating an appearance that fools other people, but having secret designs and having a secret agenda. And
there seems to be a condemnation of Malvolio's insistence on a certain level of propriety. It's almost a priggishness or a reluctance, an inability to enjoy life, and that condemns him. That's why they have so much support with him. Sure,
absolutely. But I think it was popular in the time too, because the Puritans, I think, were a particular societal force at the moment the play was written, that I think people had a certain amount of abrasion for, or abrasive, felt a certain amount of abrasiveness. I mean, in the same way that I won't assume for you, but that I might think of evangelical Christians who I don't particularly admire as a group.
I'll just nod.
Yeah, we don't want to alienate your core audience here.
If our core audience is evangelistic, no.
But anyway, I think that was present in the writing. But I think the conflict between Malvolio and Feste runs very, very deep. Just as there are some other parts of the play that I think are, you can make certain judgments about them on the surface, but I think they also run deeper.
I think you're hitting into something, Michael, in terms of the connection to the religious aspect of what's the background of a play. In some previous discussions that we had, we were speaking about Macbeth, we were speaking about Hamlet, and in those discussions, we talked about the religious undercurrent of what's going on in England at the time. And this is written, Twelfth Night is written in about 1601 or 1602, and that is just after the ascension of King James I, who has succeeded Elizabeth and unified England and Scotland for the first time. And with him, as part of his new reign, is this new emphasis on on Protestantism as opposed to Catholicism, and that was in Elizabeth's era also, but it took on a new resonance, a new significance with the ascension of James I. And I think perhaps what you're hitting into is that perhaps Feste embodies the Protestant character, who in Elizabethan society is considered as a more less priggish or less concerned with some of the aspects of Catholicism that they would consider undesirable. So the fact that you're kind of connecting that to a modern day equivalent, I think that's a good connection. So I think yes, there is that we embody, we being Feste representing the audience in some way, that they're wiser in some way, that they're in on the joke, whereas Malvolio is not in on the joke. He's the one who's the outsider, even though in terms of their position, Malvolio outranks Feste, and he's more of an insider class-wise, but in terms of the real connection to the people, the real connection to the queen or to the Duchess, the Feste is the one who has the inside track.
What's the author saying then in terms of Malvolio when he realizes, as much as it's a deception, that someone is in love with him, he gives this all up and he becomes a vaudeville fool, if you will.
Well, I think if we're going with the idea that Malvolio in some way represents the undesirable character, which we're correlating possibly to the Catholic, which is the religion that's fallen out of favor, the religion that's being prosecuted by the Protestant majority, then perhaps the idea is that the Catholics are equivocators. They're people that are one thing on the surface, but then when you press them, then their real truth comes out, and the real truth is not what they want it to be, or what they seem. So maybe it's the idea is somewhere underneath the if you pull it back the layers a little bit, peel the onion a little bit, that the Malvolio character pretends to be much more pious than he is, much more a man of God than he is. But when pushed a little bit, his animalistic side comes out.
Now, I think of, can I just respond to that a little bit? I think of that part of Malvolio, the hidden and then the revealed. I think of Olivia in the same way. That she's made this decision, and who knows what it came out of. Maybe she was mean to her brother the day before he died. We don't know, and she feels like guilty as hell. And but also she's probably afraid. Her father died the year before, and now all of a sudden she's alone. She's the orphan. All the men have deserted her, and in psychological terms, she's probably also angry at both of them for deserting her. Who knows? But anyway, she's made this vow of 7 years, not to have anything to do with men, which is, also maybe a little bit angry. But the thing of it is that when Viola hits her with the Willow Cabin speech, which is, a beautiful piece of writing, and also tells us who Viola is. And so when Olivia is hit with that, what it really does is it kind of cuts through all of this other stuff to reveal who Olivia more truly is at base. And what she is someone who wants to live and someone who wants to love. And the way to live amongst this death that she's experienced is to start a new family and to be in love, and with all of that maintains that. So it's why she flips so hard and so fast. It's because it's already in her. And that's what I feel about Malvolio too, is the reason he goes so hard and fast and gives up whatever facade he may have built up is because it's already in him.
Right.
He's already, yeah.
I was reading not long ago. I was looking at different conspiracy theories on this as while I'm an Edwardian, I keep my mind open to others. And there was one that they're saying that these plays had a woman's influence, because Shakespeare's women are so powerful and they're so intelligent. You even bring that up. The description of one is her intellect and not something immediate like her beauty. We also get, I always wondered why so many of his comedies, the woman must dress as a man to achieve any kind of success in some way. So I'm seeing that. And now I'm thinking of the time periods that you'd mentioned. Yes, there was one you did Elizabethan, but one, it was put in the 1950s.
Yeah.
And then one in the 1800s, did you say?
No, 18th century, I would say 1740, 50 would be the time period.
Interesting.
The Victorian era.
A little earlier than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting as we get into this discussion of the virtues of Olivia. It seems to me that maybe there's a correlation between the monarch, the female monarch, who never
Absolutely.
marries, and Queen Elizabeth, who just recently, the beloved Queen Elizabeth, who for so many years has been at the helm of England, and whom they adored, and who was known as the Virgin Queen, who never married, who never begot a child. Perhaps this is a correction to her reign. That wouldn't it be amazing if this amazing queen that we had, the Queen Mother, who for so many years was the paragon of beauty and of virtue, wouldn't it be amazing if she had some resolution, some a successful marriage at the end? Is that perhaps a jab at James I? Is it a loving nudge to Elizabeth I? What do we think of that?
I mean, my instant reaction is that Shakespeare, if he's the author, may have, who knows how long he'd been conceptualizing the play and how long it had been, gestating in him. I'm not, I have no way of knowing, but the fact that he made strong women, intelligent, interesting women, I think could have been a nod to Elizabeth all the way through his career. And if he'd been conceptualizing Twelfth Night while she was still alive, it may have been some sort of an offering. But as to how it relates to her never having married, I don't know how to connect those two.
There is some indication in some of the scholarship about the play that that Twelfth Night was sourced from an earlier play in the 1580s. Let's see, that's Barnaby Rich's farewell to his military profession, and some various other components of it from an Italian comedy, which is translated as The Deceived. Now it's from the 1530s. So like in many of his other plays, Shakespeare borrows from previous works and he puts his own spin on it. Now, whether the spin is as we've been mentioning, the riff on Olivia being a stand-in for Queen Elizabeth, perhaps, with Malvolio and Feste being the stand-ins for the Catholic and the Protestant. Perhaps that's all in there, but the larger issue, whether that's there or not, is the fact that it's a riotous comedy. It's one of the most beloved comedies. But why is it as long as we're going into the source material for it, what about the additional name that Twelfth Night has of What You Will? What do we make of that name? It seems like a throwaway, like it's whatever you want it to be. It is what it is.
Olivia says it. She says when Malvolio is knocking at when Viola's first knocking at the door, as Cesario, she sends Malvolio to see what he wants, and she says, tell him I'm indisposed. I forget what she says. Tell him I'm something, or what you will to dismiss it, which I always found sort of curious. Maybe it's just a coincidence, or
that's great. But yeah, so how does that jump into being a subtitle for the play?
I think he's saying that you can make of it what you will, because you really can run with this play in several different directions.
Right.
As you know, all of the commentary in the foreword to the art, and it's a very complete commentary. And there's one section where it talks about who's the most compelling character in the play, and it really cites a lot of examples where Malvolio is the most compelling character, and I view him as the antagonist, so that's fine. Or sometimes it's Toby's play, sometimes it's Olivia's play, but for me, ultimately, it's Viola's play, as I said in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think depending on what you want from the play, it can really be shifted and pushed around a little bit, and maybe that's what he meant.
That's possible.
I've always imagined that because all of his comedies have this sort of non-committal name. The Comedy of Errors, A Midsummer Night's Dream, Twelfth Night, because that's when we're doing it, or whatever you want to do to dismiss it. I always get the idea it's almost in the absence of a prologue. Ladies and gentlemen, no one dies tonight, so have a good evening. And you're seeing the comedy. I always wondered whether that was a demand or it was just, laughing. They just wanted to give it a funny name.
Well, that's interesting, though. I mean, because Twelfth Night was a very specific period. And also, I think this whole idea of the revels and the Lord of Misrule, and I think that was forbidden at that particular moment. That the habitual kind of celebrating was not allowed at that moment. And that's for everything to be turned topsy-turvy. And partly for me, so if he gave the name Twelfth Night to the play, then he might be saying, this is not going to be your ordinary concept of Twelfth Night, or maybe it is. I don't know. One thing is clear to me, though, is that Toby he's the master of this. If Feste's the master of the revels, Toby is the Lord of Misrule. And it took me a long time to try to put together my feelings about Toby, because he really creates a certain amount of mayhem in Act 2. And I always kind of questioned the source of that. But it helps to think of him as the Lord of Misrule. I think in my own version of it, I think of him as someone who's most at home when he's in the center of anarchy, or when he's creating anarchy.
Malvolio.
No, Toby.
Oh, Toby.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting. Why did you put yours? And it's my favorite era, so you have no complaints here. Why are you placing your musical in the 60s?
Because there's a lot of thematic convergence for me there. By making the Feste character a Black blues musician, and I've also made the Fabian character, who's always somewhat problematic to me. I made him an old Black servant who came up through Jim Crow. So his desire to put this thing over on, and I wanted to heighten the conflict between the Malvolio character, who, as I said, I think of as kind of a Nixonian Republican. I mean, you could, in our own terms, you could say, well, is he someone like Stephen Miller, who's a racist,
Wow.
I forgot what I was talking about. I lost my train of thought. You said why did I put in the 60s?
Right.
Well, I really, the 60s was this time of struggle for racial justice, as we all know. Martin Luther King. It was like the heyday of it. And my own 60s period is really the late 60s. It's like 67 to 69 is kind of the center of it for me. So I wanted, and in the so-called prison scene, I wanted to bring out some things about the Malvolio character, who I call Malcolm, that I think that underneath this act that he's developed of having rectitude and everything being correct and having these rules and being a secret hedonist underneath, that I also wanted to reveal him as a kind of a racist and bigot. And so that by creating a clear a clear side of the equation in the Feste character, who I call Jackie Lee, and the Fabian character. I wanted to just bring that out, but also selfishly, it has parallels in our own time. I mean, the 60s is the themes that we were occupied with in the 60s they've just all exploded in plain view again.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, it sort of drags from Elizabethan times into the 60s and then right into our own time. But the 60s gave me the most, I think, thematic material to express all this with. Plus, I love the idea of trying to create an artifact that the music of the 60s, especially those 2-3 years, has a certain character and a certain propulsion to it. It was a renaissance in its own way. It was a musical renaissance. But it had certain sounds. I mean, you know, a wah-wah pedal or an early Rhodes piano, or, you know, the certain sounds of those guitars, Hendrix guitar sound, or the chords that Hendrix used. Like he uses this, the famous Hendrix chord, I think it's a dominant 7th sharp 9, that's in Foxy Lady and in Purple Haze. And I was very happy when I found a song that I could use that chord in to evoke that sound. But really, it's the thematic things, and also the aspects of love and gender, like the attraction between Orsino and Viola as Cesario is one part of it, and then the attraction between Olivia and Viola as Cesario is another part of it. And there's a scene in what's usually made Act 2. I think it's in Shakespeare, it's Act 3, where Viola goes back to Olivia's to visit her again, and Olivia just flagrantly throws herself at Viola. And in most productions, what you see is the audience is in the know. They know that Viola's really a girl. Viola's not a boy, Viola's a girl, and therefore there's nothing, you know, possible here, and Olivia's just being fooled. Well, I wanted to sort of shift that a little and say, well, maybe there is something possible here, you know, because after all, we're living in an age when all these things are possible. So why make it so cut and dried? So that was another reason I wanted to set it in the 60s, is because I think there was ideas about sexuality and gender and stuff that were flowering then.
That's very interesting. That echoes some of the questionable nature of the sexuality of the players in Shakespeare's day, where
Absolutely.
you had the men were played by men, but then the female characters were all played by younger boys or men who were dressed in drag. So that's doubling and tripling of layers of gender confusion, we might call it, where the boy is playing the girl playing a boy. I think that the Shakespeare's audience, especially the groundlings, would get a big kick about all that, you know, the cross-dressing, so to speak, the chicanery of, well, it's a boy, but no, it's not a boy, it's a girl, but he's gonna kiss him. Oh, you know, all the silliness that goes along with it, all the slapstick, that's part of that presentation.
Yeah.
So in that respect, we have there's also some suggestion where Sebastian, who is the benefactor of the brother of
Antonio.
Right, Antonio. Right,
Yeah.
where there's some suggestion of there's some latent homosexual connection between those two, and people make a big deal about that.
In some productions, not so latent. I think it was Peter Hall that had them in their first scene getting out of bed and getting dressed.
Right.
Which I mean, I can see why he would do it and why he would want to. For me, it doesn't quite serve what I feel is in the play, but it's certainly something to try, and why not? Because it's one of the more difficult parts of the play, Antonio. How to make this fervor because it really is. He's ferocious about this fervor of the loving this person, and how to make that work really, and what role it has in the play as a whole.
Isn't it interesting that there's that kind of parallelism between those two love relationships? There's Antonio, who has this fervor, this fervent love for Sebastian, and on the flip side, there's Olivia, who has this fervent desire for Viola, dressed as Cesario. So there's that parallelism where there's the two same gender pursuits that are fruitless, because that nothing can come of it. Do you think that there's that there's like a mirror imaging between the two sets of characters? There's Olivia and Viola. There's Antonio and Sebastian. There's Malvolio mirroring, or an opposite mirror image with Feste, and some of the other characters. But it seems like there's a lot of that. That if you look at the one side, and then there's like a funhouse mirror to what the other side is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of it, and it also translates to Malvolio's obsession with Olivia, because before the letter scene, he was already obsessed with her.
Right.
And the letter scene just gave him permission to give full vent to it, and he's wronghead. But this brings me to something that I feel is central to the play, is that the idea of loving someone in a way that's wrongheaded. And the play starts out that way. It's Orsino, his love for Olivia is not based necessarily on who she actually is. It's based on who he thinks she is, and who he wants her to be and needs her to be, and his view of what love is. So there's something in the play about seeing accurately, because Orsino doesn't see Olivia accurately, and Olivia doesn't see Viola accurately, and Malvolio doesn't see Olivia accurately, and I mean, it just goes on and on.
Right, absolutely.
But Antonio, I think, does see accurately. I think he sees who this person is, Sebastian, who I guess he's in some ways saved from the same storm that supposedly had drowned him. Mm-hmm. And my solution to Antonio was, and I thought about this a long time, I made Antonio a woman, but not a straight woman. I made Antonio into a biker woman.
So it's only compounding the gender confusion.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I think the guiding thing for me with Antonio, whether it's a man or a woman or whatever it is the speech, is the great long speech where he's disappointed because his love was pure. He really, he likes this kid or young man, and if it's a he really wants to help and really admires him, wants to get him started in the world. He knows he's an orphan. He's, and finding out that he lost his sister, which is one surviving relative, is, has only probably strengthened this idea. And so when he thinks that who he thinks is Sebastian has rejected him, I think he's deeply hurt. And this speech comes out of that, this thinking that his pure love has been rejected. And so for me, it translates just as well the way I've set it up, because I think this woman and I know this woman. I know this woman personally. I've sort of modeled her on this woman. She's a woman who's very tender and sensitive, but at the same time, she wants to appear tough. She walks around in, she's a lesbian woman. She walks around in classic, one could even say a cliche garb of lesbianism, jeans and plaid work shirts. And she wears a thick leather belt with the keys hanging from the side. And, and she walks with a kind of a swagger because she doesn't want anybody to fuck with her. But, if you tell her something funny, she laughs with this girlish laugh and just, is so open. And so, where was I? The thing for me is that whatever her gender preferences are, or her sexual preferences are. Her feeling for Sebastian, I think there's something motherly in it that's beyond and deeper than choices. And so she really tries to take care of this kid, who is a kid to her, and she's seen enough of the world to try to set him on the right road and look after him for a while.
That's very interesting.
So that's what it's about for me. I
Right.
mean, other people can certainly make a sexual relationship out of it if they want to.
But yeah, I think that's a really good analysis. Is that there are so many different love relationships in the play, and which one is the purest? Which one is the correct or the ideal love relationship? And I don't think that we really find any that are ideal. I think every one of them is knocked in some way, and then perhaps at the end, in the comedies, there's always the gamos at the end. There's always the multiple marriages, and that's the nicely tied bow where everyone gets married, and but it seems like there's some friction in there where even though everyone's getting married at the end, and it's this quote unquote happy ending, the nice resolution of the play, it seems like none of the life relationships are really quite what you would hope that they would be.
I'm so glad you said that. Let's talk love let's talk Shakespeare in love. In all of Shakespeare's comedies, there's a level of mistaken identity. There's a certain kind of relationship, and there's always that humor. I always think inside of Shakespeare, there's clues. Shakespeare, I've always felt, was clairvoyant. Whoever Shakespeare is, his Jewish characters is not who you would expect the Jew to be at that point. His Moor is not who you expect the Moor to be. Even in Titus Andronicus, the Moor is not who you expect it to be. It seems like he knew what the future was going to hold. That's why I asked about the strong women characters. Back then they were not. Even you look at someone like Juliet, which is an early Shakespeare, there's less. He builds into these amazing women and this really interesting view of love, which is in all of his comedies. Do you think it's, your opinion on this, do you think it's shtick? Do you think it's, he does these things like a sitcom where the audience knows what's going on and they're going to laugh, just, hey, how are you? Oh, they find it funny because they know it's a woman dressed as a man who's playing a woman who's playing a man. Or do you think there's something deeper? Do you think he's trying to elucidate his audience without them knowing it, if you will?
I think that's the brilliance of Shakespeare, and I think that's why Shakespeare is the most enduring author or the playwright of the past 400 plus years, and not necessarily Marlowe or Ben Jonson or any of the other contemporaries, because while they all produce wonderful plays, Shakespeare's plays have that overt comedy, they have the high comedy, they have the low comedy. In all of them, there is exactly that quality that you discussed, where there's something transcendent, there's something ambiguous, there's that gray area where you can read in 400 plus years later a connection with today's ambivalence about certain characters, or today's questioning about, is this character what we would understand in a contemporary vision as a Jewish character that we can sympathize with. It's not just the evil, the Jew of Malta. It's not just the barbaric, the barbaric evil character. It is a character who is dimensional. It is a character who is multifaceted, who we can sympathize with, empathize with, whom we connect with, whose words are some of the most famous words. If you prick us, do we not bleed? And that's not just for Merchant of Venice. That's for even Twelfth Night, even Malvolio. Even though he is the clown who is the one who we mock and we jeer at and we throw him in jail and we have all kind of fun with him, at the end he has the I will be revenged upon the lot of you. We have that feeling that, hey, even though this is a buffoon, it's a comic character, there's something that's wrong here. There's something that we connect with, that we sympathize with here.
Now, I completely agree with you. One of my favorite expressions is, "Are you a genius by accident or on purpose?" Michael, do you think this was done on purpose? The hand who wrote these plays, who wrote Twelfth Night, and the whole mistaken identity, the whole concept of the love in there and these characters' motivations. Do you think it was let's make the audience laugh, or let's make the audience think?
I think it's both. To me, he had a company. He was an actor. So when he played, I don't know what kind of an actor he was, but he was probably a pretty good one. And there's probably evidence to support that or contradict it. I don't know. But
there's more evidence of him as an actor than there is of him as an author. But
okay. But anyway, he was an actor, so he wasn't just a man sitting behind a desk. He's a man that knew he had to get from one side of the stage to the other. And he's a man that knew that he had to change somebody's mind. He wasn't just a guy writing beautiful words and thinking, oh, this will be cool. He probably was that too. And also his company, I think, had to have kept him honest. I mean, Burbage and the clowns, the people who played the clowns, what were the names? Will somebody and
Will Kemp and
oh yes.
Yeah. I mean, these are pretty smart people, I think, and I think they had to push him and say, I mean, well, you can see it. Tom Stoppard, you can see it in Shakespeare in Love somewhere.
Oh yes.
But I think that having a company, my God, what better thing? And then they probably gave him some of his best ideas, or at least maybe stuck a fork in him, and he went, "Oh yeah," So I think it's both. I think he knew stagecraft, and then but stagecraft is not necessarily going to get you to the Fall of the Sparrow speech in Hamlet. I mean. I forget how it goes, but if it be now, then it won't be later. And if it's not later, then, then it's yet to come.
There's providence in the fall of a sparrow.
Yes, exactly. But he knew where he wanted the character to be, that Hamlet had reached a kind of balance and maturity. And the tragedy is that 20 minutes later, he was dead. But it's also in that scene, I think, that Horatio says, when he talks about how he disposed of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, how he read their letters, and he made sure that they were then put into a position where they would be killed. And Horatio is in seemingly very open admiration said, because Hamlet took responsibility, he said, "Why, what a king is this?" And if Hamlet is to some extent the prince who would be king, in that moment, in that scene, he achieved it. He was a king. He had become a king, and he wasn't in charge of the kingdom, but he had achieved that in himself when he was just a mess in the beginning.
In answer to your idea about whether it's intentional or just accidental, that there's this high-mindedness with Shakespeare, I don't think it's an accident that Shakespeare becomes the resident playwright for King James. They become the king's players. So the fact that he is the influential playwright, he is the one who is the voice of the generation, shall we say. He's the one who is the primary entertainer of the masses. It's no accident that King James would select such a person as he.
Yeah.
Michael, you bring up something that made me smile immensely when you said his company kept him honest.
Yeah.
so yes, there's definitely someone who understands stagecraft, and all around him are people with other adventures, other experience, other intellect, contributing to these plays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
I feel the wind up coming up.
Oh no.
I've always wondered about that. There's so many theories these days about other people contributing to his plays. The first episode we did in the series, Pericles, it was all about there was a contributing author, and people talk about two noble kinsmen that way. And now they're finding little pieces of so many other works that belonged to another author within Shakespeare. So the concept of it being it took a village to write the folio has now got me thinking. I think that's really brilliant. I'm really thrilled you said that, frankly.
Well, in defense of the other position, I do think that that structurally the plays are so brilliant. I mean, Twelfth Night is structurally, it's so tight and it moves so fast, so far, so fast.
It's said to
I
be
don't-
one of his best in terms of structure, which
I don't think, I'm not sure that a group of people could, you know, could make that happen. I think that has to be the concept of a singular mind. To me, is to create this structure. I think maybe you know, who knows what the company contributed. It could have been dialogue, it could have been lines, it could have been actions, it could have been don't end the scene this way, end it that way, or let's cut this scene, it's not doing any good, or, you know, I mean, any number of things. But as a whole, the structure of a play like Twelfth Night, I think, came from and this is my, you know, my unlearned opinion, came from a single mind.
it's
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, there's clearly we referenced earlier in the hour, we referenced about how Shakespeare is drawing upon earlier sources for these plays, plays from the 1580s, from the 1530s. We know that he was very fond of drawing upon some of the Italian comedies, some of the even the Comedy of Errors is based on the Brothers Menechmi, an ancient Roman comedy. You know, so there's no secret that Shakespeare drew upon other sources to inform his works. And whether that means that, as Jay might be suggesting, that he took in ideas from others, or there were some collaborations with other writers of that era, it's possible. It's possible that they all went to the bar. You know, there was a couple of bars that are very well known that the playwrights all hung out in, the actors all hung out in. It could very well be that there was some discussion and some ideas bandied about, and he took those and he jotted it down. And he came back, and all of a sudden, well, here you go. Here's Twelfth Night, and here's this joke, or here's this this bit that I heard at the bar that made its way into the play. But and that's fine. But you know, I think we're to say that means that Shakespeare was not Shakespeare is a little bit of a false idea. You know, there's so many even in music. Michael was talking about some musical things earlier. Even in contemporary music, there are so many times where you'll hear copyright lawsuits where a contemporary artist will have a song that's a smash hit, and all of a sudden they'll go and they'll sue him, and they'll say, well, wait a minute, that song is a ripoff of so-and-so song that this other artist did 20 years ago. And he said, no, I promise you, this is my own work. And they'll put the two songs on top of each other, and they'll say that, well, wait a minute, no, that this is the riffs in this song are close enough to the other song that we say that it's a ripoff. And there's some validity to that, but there's also, I think, we're stretching when we're doing that, because even if you hear a song and that informs you, it doesn't mean that you intentionally or necessarily are taking that song and copying it. I think any one of us throughout our lives, we are informed by so many things that we see and hear and experience and we live through, that all of that in some way, shape, or form informs our worldview and informs our output as artists.
Yeah,
I agree. However, we have copyright laws, and we have access to historical records of everything from music to drama to whatever. Back then, they didn't. A play could be immensely obscure. So someone could have heard a play or read a piece, or even heard a piece of music, and no one else would have. I recall as a kid, the screaming headline usually was yesterday's news, because we had to wait for the newspaper to come out. Today, our phone rings and we know exactly what's going on. So
right. But as Michael suggested, the ability to take all of that information and synthesize it in a way that is different than what all the other people are presenting, that stands out, that not only stands out for that era, but stands the test of time for not decades, but centuries. I think that's what really identifies who Shakespeare is and the quality of his work. And ultimately, whether you believe Shakespeare was Shakespeare, or you believe Shakespeare was someone else under the guise of the name Shakespeare, or a collaboration of artists, ultimately the proof is in the pudding that the works are some of the most masterful works in the history of Western culture.
You will never hear me complain about that. Who signed them? That's the story. But the fact that they are definitive, surely. I've seen several productions of Twelfth Night, and I'm amazed. And I was actually in the Comedy of Errors and several others, and the brilliance of the math within his comedies, as much as you might call it formulaic, the math in his comedies is quite brilliant, and his use of something as simple as mistaken identity, and we see it in every sitcom.
Right.
It's
a
really
standard
quite brilliant.
comedic trope.
Yeah.
But done by a master,
Creating
it's another
really.
level. Right.
There are interesting. There's an interesting arc though that I am sort of curious about over the course of his writing life. I mean, when you take a play like Titus Andronicus, which is all about revenge, and then you trace that all the way through The Tempest, and somewhere in the middle is Hamlet. You take that all the way through to The Tempest, where Prospero relinquishes the idea of revenge. And I sort of call it the cycle of revenge. And to me, that's kind of an indication of one mind. It's just like Prospero, his daughter has fallen in love with the son of the King of Naples, who's responsible for Prospero being on the island. And so Prospero really should take revenge on him. But I think, and this is not necessarily in the forefront of the play, I mean, you have to kind of glean it and bring it out, but I think somehow Prospero, well, this is what I would do with it anyway, that Prospero knows that if he takes revenge on his future son-in-law's father, it's going to screw up his daughter's marriage and life and happiness.
Right.
And that he, maybe he realizes that part of the problem is his own preoccupation with this power that he focused on to the detriment of other things. And so instead of continuing in that way, he relinquishes the power. And
that's really interesting.
Maturity of the writer and the evolution of his journey as a writer.
Yeah.
Over those,
I was going to say evolution because you basically described Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
Two families alike in dignity, but they're warring against each other. The difference being Prospero says, I'm not going to cause any more death or anything like that.
Yeah, in Romeo and Juliet, everybody dies,
Right.
And they don't make it. In Hamlet, he doesn't take the revenge for whatever the combinations of reasons are, but he ends up dead. In Titus, it's all about revenge.
Right.
Anyway, it's just an idea I have about the cycle of revenge and where Shakespeare, the place that Shakespeare gets to in regard to that in The Tempest.
I'm going to look through his works that way. That's really quite brilliant. That's really quite brilliant. Wow.
Michael, as we come to the conclusion of our hour, if people want to check in and find out more about you and about your upcoming adaptation of Twelfth Night, where can they go to find that out?
Well, I have a website. It's my name, www.michaelmedeiros.com. And it's behind. I need to do a lot of work on it, but it does have a lot of information about me and about what I'm doing. And I've made some films, and so there's information about that there, and also my acting work and my other directing and musical work. So certainly anybody can find me there, and I think there's a way of contacting me through the site.
Fantastic.
And for this musical version of Twelfth Night, are you along enough that you could say, well, at this point I'm hoping to premiere it, or at this point I want to workshop it, or is it still
I don't know the answer to that, because I've really I'm at the point where I've made demos of most of the score, and so I need to do that essential work of finding somebody who's interested in it. So I'm really at the beginning.
The end of one part of the journey and the beginning of another.
Exactly. And who knows how long that will take. Sometimes I think it's the perfect play for now because it explains so many things about where we are, but in a way that's a lot of fun. And then sometimes I think, well, theaters must have so many writers backed up in their systems, but then I can also make a movie about it because since I have made films, I can make it as a film.
And if you have the proper press rep to be your cheerleader, let's cut through that.
You've got a good one
right
right in front of you.
All right.
The moment you're ready to talk about it outside of your piano, please feel free to contact me. I love the Shakespearean musical. I love the concept of the adaptation, of bringing it to the people in so many different. When we get down to it, Shakespeare took ancient Italian works, ancient Greek works, and gave them to the Renaissance stage, and they may not have ever known those plays. So you're doing the same thing. And however I can help, please.
Thank you. Thank you. And Hamlet came from omelet in Denmark. So,
It came from the Spanish tragedy. It came from omelette.
Right.
There's one called Ur Hamlet.
Right.
Yeah.
Please, we'll need another hour. So let's not go there.
All right. Well, thank you for including me in this. It's been fun.
Oh,
Thank you, Michael.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed your contributions.
Thank you. Thanks. Nice to meet you both.
It's a pleasure.
Same
and Jay,
here.
I appreciate our periodic discussions of Shakespeare and our deep dives into these plays. This was a fun one. It's always a pleasure chatting about Twelfth Night. It's one of my favorites. And I think we uncovered some really interesting things tonight. I look forward to our next one. That'll be in early 2021.
Indeed. We may even start looking at the apocryphal works. Maybe we'll grab one of those rare pieces that might not be well, don't ask me to say it, but one of those rare apocryphal pieces. We'll just say that.
Sounds good to me.
Rodney, always a pleasure. You know that I always come away feeling like I've learned something, and for an arrogant bastard like me, that's high praise I could give to anyone. And Michael, I say the same to you. It was really a pleasure chatting with you, and some of the concepts that you've handed us today, I'm really fascinated over, and I'm thrilled.
Thank you.
So it's
fun discussion. Really, thank you both.
Thank you.
Have a happy holiday to you both.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Joy into the new year. And let's have a new reality in 2021.
Hopefully, Corona-free 2021. Let's go.
That would be nice.